So today we're going to so we did a demonstration of painting a cube and a sphere, and this was the painting that we did. Now a lot of times when you paint the painting the first time, it may need some corrections. So my sphere was kind of out of whack a little bit. The perspective on the box was out of whack a little bit. The lines weren't quite straight in a couple of places. So most times, whenever you're making a painting, you'll do what's called a rough end. Now this is basically going to be my rough end, or if you want to say, well, I'm going to correct the painting. Either way, we're going to put a second layer of paint pretty much over the whole surface. Now this is going to do two things for us. First, we're going to get better contrast. Whenever you have an underpainting done, or a rough end, or even a previous painting, and you go to paint over the top of it again, you're going to always get more contrast than you ever will in one sitting, or what's called alla prima. So we're going to go ahead and go into this. I've basically got black and white. So this we have ivory black, and I've mixed up a full 10-step value scale from those three different grays that I've talked about on earlier videos. So I just took the time to mix up more of those. I think I actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 steps of value. Kind of went the extra mile, I guess. So this will save me time for mixing. In terms of, I brought in a couple brushes that we don't normally use in the beginning class, because we usually want people just to learn to work with paint instead of getting really persnickety like we're going to get on this thing. That's more of the drawing, painting 2 class and stuff. And so what I've added is I've got a long synthetic flat. This is supposed to emulate, it's a synthetic, but it's supposed to emulate mongoose hair. So it's not as soft as, say, a watercolor brush or an acrylic brush, but it's not as stiff as the hog bristle. This is synthetic hog bristle, but still, it's a coarser brush. This is a number 6. I think this is probably another number 6 as well. This is using the American system for brushes. There's another one where the same brush might be a number 12 or something like that. This is just this is a synthetic little filbert. It's a soft hair brush. These are a couple bristle brushes. They're a little smaller to get in some of the smaller areas. And so these are, what are these? The ones of filbert? Oh, they're both filberts. Okay. And they look like they're number 2s or something like that. Oh, they're number 1s. Okay, I've flattened them, and so it's splayed out the brushes. Okay, so number 1 filberts. They could be flats. I just grabbed what I had in the studio. And then this is just a little small synthetic, a number 2 or a number 1 round. And I've got like over 250 brushes. I could have used all rounds for this. The brush, at least to me, I use all kinds of brushes. It doesn't matter a whole lot. The rounds are really good for really getting into small areas. But flats are better for reaching larger areas much more quickly. So I'm going to use both to try to make this a little quicker. So what we're going to do is we're going to start usually with the sphere, because it's the main event on this thing. And so I'm going to go ahead and start putting some of this. And I've got these correction lines. I did it in charcoal. You can maybe see just very faintly. Up here I did it in charcoal, but down here I did it in white charcoal. So I can actually see where I want to correct this. You want to correct this to. So we're going to start putting on some paint for this. And I've got these convenience mixtures, so I don't have to mix as much. And the fact that I've got this paint down here from the previous session, again, is going to help anchor it under the right value. So again, I'll have a lot better time because paint, no matter how, I should have dipped this in mineral spirits first, but it's too late now. We're already on here. I had lost my train of thought, but so you'll see me switching between the values as this gets lighter, and rounds around the corner we're using lighter and lighter values to show and indicate that light is is wrapping around this surface. We're also going to again trim out the edge on this. And this is all we're doing for this thing. We're just going to continue to try to get a little better gradation. We've got the basic value structures already down here, so it's going to be easier to modify them and manipulate them and all that good stuff as we're painting. That's a good thing as we're painting. And this is already going to look more round because again it wasn't round before. I think we're just going to go ahead and focus on maybe this area. I'm not going to repaint the background right now. If this was, you know, a finished painting or a painting I wanted to exhibit or enter in a show, well then yeah, I would repaint the whole thing. But I think you'll get enough of the idea that I'm not going to, you know, subject you to watching me paint the whole thing like that. It's just going to take, it would take a lot of time. And it's basically doing the same thing. I'm just going to be jumping around on these different values to get the different gradations that I need. And so like I said, I think you'll be able to get a good enough feel for what we're doing. Now, this, if you haven't seen this video, you can certainly go to the first one and watch, or, you know, they're in real time. This is in real time. So I think it's important, even though sometimes it can be more than one can burn through in one sitting. It's important to have the, you know, to watch somebody's process really teaches, you know, you a lot about, you know, how you would approach, you know, a subject, and to see how it's going to get lighter. That was a cast shadow that wraps up the sphere, so it's going to get lighter as it comes over here. So I'm gonna, I have to, you know, bring the paint together so it can blend lightly and gently. So I'm also going to be blending some of that a little bit. It's going to be a little bit lighter, so there's a soft edge, but we don't want it to be too hard of an edge. So it's all about, whenever you're painting, it's a lot about the value, and even when we're with color, then it's also about edge manipulation, which is, you know, what I'm trying to pay attention to, that the edges aren't too harsh, that they sort of bleed a little bit one into the other, so that it feels like it's light moving across the surface. I don't want it to, you know, be just, I need it to feel like it's light. And light, you know, has a nice transition, a soft transition as it travels across the surface. Again, that's the cast shadow. I think I need a little smaller brush. I'm going to grab this, come back in here, and now we're going to go into the, right next to this cast shadow. I'm going to go ahead and dip this in mineral spirits, get a little bit of flow to the paint. Try to soften this edge just a bit as I continue to paint on this, working in a little bit lighter gray. So again, just give us a little bit more of a transition. This thing gets lighter as it comes over here. Now I grabbed a little bit lighter value, so I can't just grab the value that the object will be, because of the fact I'm working into paint. So I already had paint there, and there was black in that paint, and there was so much black I had to go a couple steps lighter than I actually need, so that it would be the actual value that I needed it to be. So, you know, we're going to do what's called, when we're working on this, we're going to use overmixing and undermixing, and that just means you have to work with the paint that's there. You have to sometimes go a little bit darker than what it will be, because it will mix with what's there, and it will be darker by the time it mixes. So you're trying to, you know, estimate how you're going to have to manipulate the paint, and this just comes from, you know, from practice and playing with paint. There's no secret, you know, some secret that all of a sudden will. There's I guess all I'm saying is that you have to practice. There's no substitute for practice, and that's true for painting. Something that you have to do. You can either do it or you don't, and if you don't, well, then you're not gonna it's not gonna come easily, and it's gonna seem mysterious, and how do they do that? But the more you paint, the more you go, okay, yeah, I see what's been done. Okay, he's working into wet paint. He's working wet into wet. So there's going to be softer edges. You're analyzing. Whenever you're painting, you're always analyzing. Art is a thinking process. Always thinking about what's happening as you're painting. If you're not doing that, your painting's not going to turn out as good. Sometimes people say, well, painting's instinctual. And instinctual, it means that, it comes from previous experience. It doesn't come from just some innate, unknown, mysterious, something that that no one else knows. It's not how it works. It would be like, oh yeah, people just, water skiing just naturally happens for people. No, it doesn't. You have to get out there and you have to work on your balance, and some people might have better balance, but everyone has to get out there and learn to balance on those skis and swallow half a lake in the process, and that's how you learn to water ski. There's no, there's no workaround. You have to be willing to pay the price if you're going to be, ski on the water. And most people, that want to water ski, they understand that. They're like, yeah, I expect that I'm going to have to. There's going to be a learning curve. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I have my suspicions, but sometimes with the arts, we've got all this gobbledygook that they put out in movies and different stuff, that somehow the art just flows from people, and it's just this natural thing, and they are these forces of nature and all that sort of stuff. And it's just it just is not true. That is not the way it works. So, even, if you're talking about people like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, sure, they had a lot of talent. Or, I hate the word talent. They had a lot of ability. They had a good eye, they had a keen interest, and that they were able to do it in a way that they were ahead of most people. However, they still had to be trained. If they hadn't gone and trained and devoted their life to the arts, no one would have heard of those people. And there would be no Sistine Chapel. And there wouldn't be all these beautiful places in Europe that people visit all the time to be inspired by those men, because they wouldn't have dedicated their lives. It's something that comes over a lifetime. It's not something that you're just born with and that's the way it is and stuff like that. Sometimes we have people we just heard stories, or you have people in the news, or you have people that are pushing a certain person's career, that they're just a natural master, and that's just not true. That's PR, that's advertising, that's branding and all that sort of stuff, but it's not the truth. So a lot of times some perception is reality. You got people doing that in the arts, and especially in the fine arts and things where it's more about PR than it is about some of the substance of the art. But that's not what we're looking to do here. We're looking to be able to create something that has depth to it, something that has life, as if that thing could roll right off right off of this canvas. That's the kind of thing we want to do. And it comes by it happens by using your values. It happens by your brush work and these types of things. That's how we're able to do this kind of stuff. It's not because the muses smiled on my bassinet. It's not because I came from a particular family. It's not because the fates conspired and I just was and of course there's lots of artists out there, and most of them will tell you it's a process, and these are professional artists. And it's very similar. I remember when I was in high school and stuff, going back a little bit, but that we'd have people come and talk to us that were like professional football players and people that were, star athletes and these names and of people that a lot of people really looked up to, and sometimes in some sort of pseudo superhuman way, these people seemed larger than life because of what they did for a living. But we had a lot of these people would come in and talk to us, and they say, "Look, I'm not the most talented. I'm nothing special. I just worked the harder than anybody else on my team when I was growing up, and that's why I do what I do, is because I worked hard. I paid the price, and by paying the price, I'm able to perform at a level that I can make a living at. And that's why I do what I do." And so it was very refreshing. And it's the same thing with art. If you go and talk to somebody who's, very accomplished, like a Richard Schmidt or someone like that, or some of these people, Daniel Keyes or whatever, or Jeff Watts, or some of these really, amazing artists, where it's sometimes it's almost hard to conceive of just they're just amazing at what they can do, how good they are, and but they will tell you that it's just work, it's just hard work, it's work and training. I believe Brian Mark Taylor, who's another very, very accomplished artist whose work I respect and admire, what he does. He has these DVDs on mastery, and it's all about practice. And just because it's about practice doesn't mean you have to be. So sometimes I'll give this discussion, and people are like, "I don't want to be a professional. I just want to have fun." Well, yeah, I understand that. So if that's what your goal is, well, then the idea is that the more that you do, the better you're going to be. It's nothing. There's nothing mysterious. There's nothing mystical. It is what it is. You work hard, you're gonna achieve. Or if you work longer, if you're like, "Hey, I just want to do it once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever," and if you keep it up, though, you're going to improve. If you don't work at it, you won't. It's just that simple. And it's kind of the same thing with anything. Just because you have to do it and do it a lot doesn't mean it's not fun. I've had friends that like to do, like skiing, and they've been skiing since they were, very, very young, and because they've been skiing since they were very, very young, they are very, very good. It shouldn't be shocking that they've been skiing since they were 5, and now they're, in their 40s, and they're like, "Yeah, I've been skiing for 35 years. Well, of course they'd be good. That's a lot of time to go, you got someone who goes skiing, once a month or twice a month, and been doing that for near 35 years. Why wouldn't they be good? Of course they would be. And it's the same thing with art. It's just all about training. It's all about trying your hardest and showing up and doing the work. And if you show up and you do your best and you do the work, you're going to do some stuff that will just absolutely floor you. You won't even believe. If you could take, your work back to the person 5 years earlier that was just starting out, it would blow their mind. I have people that have trained with me and just painted with me. Sometimes training sounds so aggressive. Like we're, I'm there with a big old huge megaphone or something screaming, "Come on, go, paint." I just mean they've been doing it for a long time, and they enjoy it, and they've been doing it, and that's the way it should be, that they're enjoying what they do. But there's, I have people that have been doing it for, 7 years, 8 years. And the people just starting out, they're like, "Wow, look at how good that person is." And usually the person hearing it's like, "No, I just do it. I just do my thing." And it's because of the fact that they've done it. There's a real power in actually, going through the motions. You hear stuff like this, but it really is the case. Sometimes we need to be reminded that, it is something where you have to work at it. It is something that doesn't come, natural. It's got to be worked at. The more you do it, the better you're going to be. I've seen people that are what you call weekend painters that are been painting again for a couple of, 3 decades or something, that are doing just fantastic work. You know, if they want to, they could probably go and, you know, try to, you know, they could be a career artist because they've attained and earned and achieved a level from having, you know, done it for so long. And, you know, most of these people are like, no, I just do it because I like it. And that's fine. You don't have to go and do it for a living. But all I'm saying is that there are lots of people out there that, you know, that you've never heard of, that aren't in galleries, but that like to paint, and they can, you know, paint like nobody's business, as I had an instructor used to say, paint like nobody's business. Just because of the fact that they're putting in the time. You know, they might do it, you know, once a week and, you know, paint 3, 4, maybe 5 hours a week. And if you do anything 3 or 4 or 5 hours a week, the more you do it, the better you're going to be. I mean, it's just, again, that's the way that it's going to happen for you, right? And so this is all I've done is I've been getting, I've been moving up the value scale, getting lighter, trying to, you know, reestablish the light values, establishing the middle values, establishing the dark middle values. And so I've just been, you know, slowly building this up and slowly, you know, getting darker as I move out towards over here, you know, just getting darker and darker and darker. As I move in, I'm getting lighter and lighter and lighter, and that's all we're doing. We're just going ahead and you know, we're just working the values, working the painting, working my plan, working the form shadows. And by doing this, our sphere is starting to look better and better and better. And it's the fun part. This is where things are, you know, for me, this is where things really are fun, because, you know, this is where, you know, we're getting these very subtle sorts of transitions. Again, I'm coming up the value scale because that's a little dark, coming up a little further up the value scale because it needs to get lighter still, you know, and then we're just softly, you know, putting it down. And again, so that it starts to feel almost like this, you know, like it's almost like it's been airbrushed or something. I mean, that's when you get really good at doing this, you can start to create an illusion of, you know, this just smoothly transitioning around, you know, the values and the value scale. And that's where, again, it starts to look really, really great. And again, it's where it's just so fun to be working on this when it gets to that point, because that's where, as I like to say, the magic starts to happen. Okay. So again, we're starting to get this, again, this nice transition of value on our object. And so this was again, in the first video we have the photo that I was working from. At least I think so. Some of them do, some of them don't. But this was a cardboard sphere. So it's made out of, you know, papers, you know, and so it's a little darker than the cube, which is a light, like a light birch wood or something like that. So this is, you know, overall looks a little darker than this. Again, we're starting to create that wonderful illusion that we need for our picture, our painting. I'm going to go ahead and pick up a little bit of, I think I'm going to come over here. Whoops. Accidentally kicked the table. Sorry about that. So we're going to come on over here. Got all this dark paint in there. So when you got lots of dark paint, what you're going to do is you're going to take white, push it into the brush, and then rinse it out. And I've done this a couple times already. I'll probably do it at least one more time because there's so much gunk in here. Push that white into the brush, rinse it out. You might say, well, aren't you wasting paint? Well, not really, because what happens is as I'm working the white in there, it's taking out all the gunk in there that's the gray paint and replacing it with a white gunk, and so that I can get very clean mixtures. Because the thing about oil paint, and it's probably the thing that drives people mad when they first pick up the paint, once you get used to it, you're like, oh, okay, I understand what it's doing. But in the beginning, it can be really irritating. So I'm trying to get a little better contrast between this edge and the wall behind this edge. It's not going to stay that bright, but I want it to kind of get a nice, clean, clear hedge, like so. So nice, clean edge, but that's actually too bright. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come in here with some darker paint and mix into this to make that transition more, so it's just a soft transition. And so we just wanted to do that. We're just cleaning this up, essentially. Cleaning up an edge. Okay. All right, so again, we're just going to go ahead and work into this. This will blend a little bit and it will be a much softer transition. So that way we have an edge that kind of bleeds out. And that's what we want. We don't want this to be this bright white halo. We need it to be just this soft transition. Usually when you have two edges, not usually, but when you have two edges, one edge goes darker while one edge goes lighter. And so I lightened this edge, and this is the darker edge. So that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to deal with the edge a little bit, get a little better edge work. Little, so just a little more pop, as people might sometimes will say, a little more contrast. That's what the pop is. It's a jump in contrast. So that's still a little bit on the bright side, a little bit too much of a halo. So we're just softly blending that in a bit, knocking the value down just a bit, giving it more of a softer transition. Like so. I think you could still probably be blended just a little bit more because it still looks just a little bright. So again, these illusions that we're trying to create, and that's what we're doing. We're trying to make people look at what is a two-dimensional surface, and we're trying to fool their eye into believing that it actually has depth. So we're actually, we're visual musicians, if you like. We're trying to make people believe something that actually doesn't exist. And that's part of the fun part. It's like, you were, like one, magician on a stage, or one of those street magicians that goes around does, different tricks for the, for people just, in the out on the street. So let's see. We're going to go ahead and come back over here. This one edge always goes lighter, one edge goes darker. So this is the lighter edge, that's the darker edge. Clean that up just a bit. Okay. Now we've got some stuff going on here where, again, I'm going to use, this is where I'm probably going to have to use, well, maybe I can use this one. Dip this in mineral spirits. And we're going to go ahead and trim out, this is from where the sphere used to be. Right there. And then let's see, there's a little bit of white that needs to go right here in this corner. I may not be able to get it with this rounded brush, but maybe I can. Okay, this is by way of rough painting. It's just on canvas. I'm going to turn this upside down for a minute because I'm going to work on this one. There was a bit where I could see the back on this cube with the cast shadow. So this was supposed to be, back here with this cast that little bit of light coming around the corner. And I can see it just cascade along the top edge of this cube. And so we've got some of that, but it broke outside, so I had a correction mark there. So I can go ahead and put in just the right value. Just a little dark. We need to lighten it just a scotch. So I'm going to bring just a little bit of lighter gray. Trim this out because it also wasn't straight. So I went ahead and straightened the line out to give me, to show me how, what it should be. And that's what I've got. So okay, there we go. So we trimmed that out as far as that goes. We also have a little bit. I'm going to move this over a little bit, so I can move this over a little bit, so I can get into this little area. So we have this cast shadow, and this cast shadow, again, one edge always goes darker, another edge goes lighter. So there's a ghosty line there that's from when I was using the white charcoal that I need to get rid of. So we're going to come down here. Trim that in. Hold your breath, cross your fingers, and trim it in. So, okay. And let's see, we're going to go ahead and take this again. This is supposed to be the darker edge, slightly. Like so. This edge over here is the lighter edge. So again, we're going to come over here, and it needs to be lighter still, so we're going to come up with the value scale. Lighter gray, doesn't need to be lighter still. Actually, I'm probably going to take a little bit of white. That's like the nuclear option to really pull this value back up the value scale. And that's about the value I need it on this for this cast shadow. Then I'm going to make sure that this touches this part, because that's supposed to be the darker part. This is supposed to be a little bit of the lighter part. Okay. As this moves back into here, it's supposed to be getting slightly darker. The blending that we had on here just was a little inadequate as a little tube. It just didn't transition nicely. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to blend in some of this. It gets lighter as it comes out and away from the sphere. Okay. I'm going to turn this again on the side just a little bit so I can work in here a little better. And that doesn't matter if you have to turn your painting. If you're on the easel, you can turn your canvas whatever direction you like. And again, sometimes it's just easier. Like the way I'm working, it's very easy to work back to front in the way I'm recording this. So why not? Why wouldn't I? I'm going to get that little number 1 because I want to get down here into where really it touches. And again, there's a little bit of this white chalk that where I was using as my correction tool. I have to make sure that that is not left there. So that's got to be the darkest thing. It's called an occlusion shadow. It's where the sphere is touching the cube. And I just have to, again, just make sure that we've got paint that's right next to paint. So I can't let that little white chalk outline stay on the sphere. Otherwise, it's going to mess everything up. It's going to destroy the illusion. The illusion we're trying to create is very, very easily destroyed. Trim that out. Okay. Again, obviously, I was continuing to do this. I could trim around on this some more. As far as that goes, I could take, again, we're trying to do this real time, so I don't want to take too much time. I'm going to flip it upside down for this next part. But I hope you understand, I could take, another 5 hours or something, and basically I'd be working little tiny, areas like what I'm doing right now, and I would be, trimming in trimming them up, making sure everything is straight, making sure that, that, like, getting rid of any little edges or anything that doesn't seem to make sense, and all that stuff, and that can take a bit of time. And so again, I could spend quite a bit of time on that, but we're not going to. We're going to do just enough. We're going to get the biggest, most offensive problems out, corrected, and then I just want you to understand I could take more time because, obviously, if I was going to try to make this like just the best sphere and cube you ever did see, that's not something I'm going to bang out in 2 hours. I mean, if I was trying to use a certain technique, maybe, but if I was trying to go, all right, the technique is I'm going to try to do some, highly realistic or even photorealistic. That takes time. It takes time. It's going to take, at least 3 hours or 4 hours to do something that even gets close to resembling, all the different subtleties in a photorealistic piece. It's just going to take time. Why wouldn't it? Right? That edge was a little off. Straighten the edge up. I also have this bit that I drew with. Okay. So there's a bit I drew with this, the white charcoal once again. So this edge was not a bad edge, but it's not, it's wrong. So we come in here again, I got this number 1 round brush. And I was an illustrator for many years, and, painting by hand these things I wanted to have look, photoreal. And doing it by hand. Did some by way of the computer, but it just takes time. The small brushes are really, great because you can get in there, in the little tiny areas that the bigger brushes just can't. And I'm not trying to recreate the entire painting. I'm just, basically nudging it. Okay, we're trimming that up, and okay, we're making this value a little lighter, and okay, we're going to try to like, it's a little bit choppy in here. That's if I was taking the time, I'd come back in there, really nail that down, take the time to make sure it was all nice and smooth, so the value has a nice transition, but we have texture there. So again, if I was trying to really make this seem photoreal, I'd be working in a thinner layer, really, smoothing stuff out, taking time. But, so the values actually look very, very nice. It's just that the texture has a little bit too much texture in the brush work, and I could fix that. I don't have to just go, oh no, it's I guess I'll just have to live with it. No, you can fix it. It just takes time, like anything. So I'm going to come over here and start this edge. Like so. And now I'm going to actually come in there with the lighter gray, and I'm going to push it against that stroke I just made because I need it to have a softness. Whoops. Kind of the brush touched before I wanted to. But that's okay. It's a small brush. It didn't make a big impact. That's all right. So then we got that, and then we're going to come back in here, and we're going to we're going to go ahead and work along this edge just a little bit. Clean it up. Okay. And I think, let's see if we can get away with just a little bit more of this. Hold further back on the brush. It'll be easier to blend that way. And very gently work that edge just slightly. Okay, yeah, that's doing what I want. Again, just little nuances, just little touches here, little touches there. It's where this thing is going to come alive. So again, I'm going to grab this brush here. Now it's a softer brush, and I'm going to see if I can work this. So this has, again, sort of an edge where it didn't quite touch the cube. We need to get rid of that little, it looks almost like a line. Right along the edge where the two planes meet, and you can probably see it better. I can probably see it better than you can. So again, it's gonna just make it better. It won't be like this. What's that line doing there? Because if you're like, oh, there's a line there that doesn't seem right, that's not going to help the painting. It's not going to help it at all. So I'm going to go ahead and just make this nice soft transition. That's all we're doing. Make a little soft transition there. There's a little bit of an edge that's a little too far in. Come in here, darken this slightly. Turn this over again because there's an edge right there that I want to deal with. I'm going to grab my little brush here. I'm going to load it with this lighter gray. Let's see if that may be a little too light, so I'm going to come down here, put this gray in it, and then we'll come back in here. This comes all the way again to this. I have a corner that had gotten blown out, so I need to reestablish this right here is that corner. Okay, and so now again it's looking more like the corner. I think there could be just a little bit more contrast just right there where it meets it. I like how that's looking. I'm then going to come over here. I'm going to see if I can make this a little softer at the back. Let's see if we can bring some of this into this cast shadow, just a scotch and a smidgen. I start talking like the way my grandma used to cook. A little dash of this and a smidgen of that, something here and something there. But we're just trying to get a little bit darker here, a little bit darker there. Soften this here, soften. So we are doing a little bit sort of like, the way my grandma used to cook. We're just kind of nudging it. We're, it's like tasting something. Oh, it needs a little salt, a little dash. And then you put a little dash in there and taste again. Oh, nope, it needs another little dash. And that was why it was terrible to try to get recipes from my grandma, because she didn't write anything down. She was just very intuitive when she cooked. Started throwing stuff together, and she could imagine how it would taste because she'd just been cooking for so long. And it was great for us because she could cook whatever. But it was hard when you're like, yeah, how do we replicate that? I don't know. That was usually the answer. I don't know. You do this and a little bit of that, and at the end you're like, what? How was that, Grandma? How did that go again? And she said, well, I'll tell you again. And you just a dash of this and a dash of that. And that's all there is to it. And you're like, okay, all right, well, thanks. So again, I've got some of the little marks here that I had left in there. This is actually supposed to be very, very light, a very light table. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm actually going to trim it with a little bit lighter paint, and then I'm going to bring the darker paint into it. So again, this is to clean up this edge, because if it's dark, it's a lot harder to make it lighter. It's easier to darken a value than it is to punch a value up, especially when you're working in the lights. So I'm sort of protecting it, or I'm trimming it in with this white that's actually mixing a little bit with that paint I just put down. And then I'm going to come in here with the appropriate value, and I want to go ahead and just softly knock down that white just a scotch, just a smidgen with that. And let's see if we can grab a little bit more of this paint. Give you just a little bit of a beam of light along there, just a scotch. Got to be careful because it can't be brighter than this up here, or it'll switch places with it. So that's why I'm trying to actually knock it back just a little bit. So it's just, again, just this little stuff. We've made the corners a little nicer. This corner got blown out, so we're going to go into that corner. It's too small a brush to be using that thing. So we're going to come in here. I mean, I guess I could, but it's just going to be so timid. I actually want to I want to move some paint around. That's where paint is beautiful. That's where you can get the subtlety, is by moving the paint around. So I can go over here and I can fill this in. Straighten up that edge. Like so. Okay. This edge got looks a little ghosty, so I'm just going to go ahead and bring that in a little bit. That looks a little bit like a line, so I need to lighten it up just a scotch. I need to lighten it up a bit, so I grabbed a lighter value, went over it, and now it's looking fine. Where these two edges meet, these two planes, there's usually a little bit of it getting a little lighter on the edge here. I want to find at least the appropriate value. I think that'll probably do it. And maybe I will use my smaller brush for the beginning of this, just for the edge, and then as I move the edge out, so right along that edge, that's where I'm going to want the best, the cleanest, sort of edge. And so I'll go ahead and use this little guy to lay down along that edge. Now I should say this edge right here is too, well, not up here though. It was a little too light at the bottom. But that's okay. You'll see what I'm going to do in a minute. I'm making it a little bit lighter. Okay, and I'm actually feathering it out a bit. And now I've got this little tiny shape that I can then work into with this. I'm going to turn this back around, like so. And we're going to go ahead and work into this a little bit. And I can go ahead and knock it down, a little, make it a little darker if I need to. And I can soften it up as needed. So the reason I put that little bit of paint there is that's the little bit of paint I can mix against. Plus, I've got a nice line there. So this is just basically pulling out what I can and it's just it just keeps it nice and clean. So this is sort of, you know, again, if you're doing you know, a little more advanced sort of stuff or intermediate or whatever, again, you're trying to control it. You know, this is, you can, so again, I'm going to do sort of the same thing up there with a little bit of an edge. I want a nice, tight, clean edge along here. It's actually a little bit too light. Grab a little bit darker value, and it's a little bit, it was a little too thick. It was kind of skipping over it, so put a little mineral spirits on the brush. Okay. And just trying my very best to give a nice clean edge along there. Now as it comes over here on the corner, it gets a little brighter. We're going to turn this around a little bit, and we get the lighter, this lighter value, and we're going to go ahead and again clean up this corner a bit. Whoops, went into it just a bit. So I come back in here, putting my finger down as like a little tripod. That was a little on the dark side, but now we're going to come over here and using lighter paint, we're going to mix into that little line I just put there to lighten it slightly. It was actually quite a bit darker, so I got a little bit lighter gray. But once it mixes into it, it gets darker very quickly. That's that whole over-mixing, under-mixing thing. It went, you know, I made it darker with the understanding that I was going to come in there and it was going to be lighter. So again, we've got that, you know, nice clean edge now. And again, I can come over here and right on that corner, right here, I can go ahead and trim this in. Now, if we were doing advanced painting, there's little techniques we'd be worrying about as well that we're not dealing with here. So usually, you know, you're going to make your shadows thinner, and you build up for your lights. So maybe I would do a third layer on this, and then I'd come in and I'd, you know, start to really beef up these lighter areas, because that little bit of thicker paint, you'll notice it when you're standing in front of something and it will jump out at you. And that can be, and people will do that on very realistic stuff, even some of the borders on photoreal. If you know what you're doing, it won't break the illusion. It won't be hyper real, but you can still do almost where it's close to. It's very realistic, very representational. It doesn't look like it, you know, it's so controlled that you're like, wow, is that a painting? But you know it's a painting because the paint is just jumping out at you, grabbing you by the throat and shaking you around. And so you know it's a painting. You know it can't be anything else but a painting. But man, and to me that's where it gets really, that's pretty, where it's extraordinary. You know, Rembrandt, you know, is a great example of that, where he was just caking on paint, and then he'd do these subtle glazes and these subtle transitions, and you know, especially at the time where they had no photography, you know, from a distance you're like, holy Moses, that really looks like those people sitting, you know, the night guard, you know, this group of people, you know, kind of perusing the city and keeping everyone, you know, out of trouble, I guess. But one of his famous paintings. But just that contrast, because of the paint texture and the lights built up, and it just hits you, bam! It was just fabulous, just really quite extraordinary. And that what he was able to do. It's just what's so great about Rembrandt. If anyone ever says, I don't know what was so great about Rembrandt, they don't know Rembrandt, as far as I'm concerned, because he was well deserved. Deservedly so, considered, you know, just an amazing draftsman and a great artist, and he painted for a long time. He painted so long that he actually had to sort of change the taste changed, because he'd been painting for 40, 50 years, and all of a sudden, you know, he had to change his style, because what he was doing that was so popular had now seemed like it was, you know, old. and he had to roll with it, and you know, he was able to do that on a, you know, he was able to do that. And Michelangelo was the same way. He worked till he was, I think he was 84, don't quote me on that, but he was in his 80s, which in the Renaissance was just, you know, unheard of that someone got that old. I mean, it was rare. You know, popes were dropping like flies at 50 and 60, or what have you. You know, just people were not, you know, were not living that long. And Michelangelo was, you know, did, and he had to do the same thing. Mannerism, which was very different from what he was doing, came into style, and he rolled with the punches. He's like, yeah, okay, bring it on, let's do it. And he worked in, you know, in mannerism. Just before his death, that was the style he was working in. So again, we've got this, you know, trimmed out. We've got, you know, most of these, the biggest flaws have now been addressed, and the painting, I think, is, you know, doing so much better. And again, it's just by putting the right values in the right place. It's moving the paint around. It's these little things. It's what really helps create this illusion. It's what brings the object to life, and that's what we're doing here. That was way too dark. That might be so dark I might have to wipe that. So if you ever have a value that's more than 2 steps darker, you're never going to lighten it. So that's almost 2 to 3 steps. And so I could either fight it and then never win that battle, or I can wipe it off. Better to wipe it off. In fact, I'm even going to go in here with lighter paint and kind of scumble it on, which means it's just dry brushing very, very lightly over the canvas. And then I'm going to come back in with the correct value. So, and like I was saying, most of the problems in this painting have been addressed. We've straightened up the funky lines. We've straightened up the funky circle and all this sort of stuff. If I was if I wanted to, again, really take this to the next level, again, I could stay on the sink for another 3-4 hours, just making sure that every little place is exactly how I want it. That it's all creating the illusion that I want to have happen. But we're doing pretty good here. I still think these 2 lines, now the camera's exaggerating this because the camera's a little bit askew, so we have a little bit of what's called parallax. But these lines are actually coming in just a little bit, these lines, and so I would clean that up. This line isn't quite straight, so I'd come in there and I'd clean that up. So we'd come in here, okay, how do we, well, I'm going to get this little thing, we're going to come down in here, and we clean up that edge. You know, this is what takes all that time, where you're trying to look at every little area and ask, is every little area exactly how I want it? And there's a lot of little subtlety. I mean, we're going on almost 50 minutes here working with this, and you know, we haven't, you know, I by no means have recovered the entire canvas. If I was going to recover the entire canvas, it would certainly take me time to do that. And I'm not going to, you know, make you sit through that. But the idea is that this has really gone from sort of, you know, it was a nice painting, but again, we went ahead and corrected the sphere that was out of whack, the circle, straightened up these lines, straightened up some of the corners. Again, I don't know how well it translates on the video because we can see more with our eyes, but this is still pretty thin through here, even the changes I made. So I would put another layer over that. This is still kind of thin. I'd put another layer over there. I'd like to play with that edge a little bit more. I would play with that. This is pretty thin because I trimmed it out, but I didn't trim around it, and I have to make it look right. So the paint is quote unquote seamed. So the paint isn't quite seamed through here quite right, except right there where I worked it. It looks very different there than everywhere else because it's got paint on there. So I would trim around here. I'd repaint the whole background. I'd repaint the whole cube. I'd repaint everywhere. And by doing that, you just kick it up a level as long as it doesn't get, away from you. By that I mean you don't, get the values, or you don't start overworking it, or, panicking and then starting having issues because you started to panic when you started to paint. So go ahead and, again, if you've done the sphere and the cube and you're like, well, it's a little rough, well, we talk about how to bring a circle into a better circle, which I did. Took a vertical and horizontal line, measured the distance, and then kind of made marks all the way around to trim out that circle a little bit better. Used a straight edge on the box and used charcoal to line those up and make those marks, and marked that there. And then we just painted it. And again, like I said, this corner here doesn't quite, there's like a little bump there that's just not right. So I'd clean that up. Again, just these little bits. As you clean those bits up and as you make them better and better, just those little nuances, it looks more and more and more real. It really starts to create that illusion of depth. And so again, this is again just the sphere and the cube, monochromatic painting, or grisaille if we want to use a French term, meaning grays. So we have a gray scale, which would normally what we would could call this, or you could call it monochromatic, but this is, very much the gray, so grayscale to me makes more sense. And of course, if I put this in a frame, it would trim this out so it would be nice and straight around the edges. I don't care about that so much, that the edges are a little frumpy, because you could put it in a frame, and the frame would cover about a 1/4 inch all the way around, so it would clean up that edge. If I was doing an illustration where they were going to photograph it, well, then I'd have to tape this off and make it nice and clean and beautiful and all that good stuff. We're not going to that level on this. But again, there's just a couple areas. There's like where this hits, there's a little bump that comes out on the sphere. That would have to go away. I'd trim into that. There's still some stuff around here I'd want to trim. And so it's just little stuff like that. And again, the more you do it, and what I would most likely do is I'd let this dry again and do a 3rd layer. If you do a 3rd layer, again, because you've really anchored the values, you've corrected most of your issues. So I'd set this aside for about 3 days, 4 days, and I'd come back in, and again, I'd repaint the whole thing with a 3rd layer. And again, you get more contrast. The more layers you put on, the more contrast you get, and you can really get that subtlety, that beautiful sort of subtlety that we associate with photography. So this has been Kevin McCain with Idaho Art Classes and Kevin McCain Studios. I appreciate you watching the video. Again, if you've seen the first one and tried to paint along with it, and do some corrections in charcoal and try to put a 2nd layer on. Go ahead and, I mixed out all my different grays, so we have a full, actually I had 11, so we had the full grayscale, plus there's a little half step that I mixed up. And again, it can really help your paintings get to that next level. So give this a shot. Have yourselves a great day. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye now.